Stop calling them East Asian allies. China, Japan, and South Korea are more like neighbors who share a fence, a cultural background, and an inexplicable commitment to making each other's lives miserable. The type of relationship where sharing K-pop, anime, and mobile games somehow coexists with trade wars, diplomatic freezes, and the kind of passive aggression that would make your mother proud. Welcome to Rice Degree, the place where we teach things they don't teach at Harvard. This is the story of how China, Japan, and South Korea became the world's most expensive therapy case study. And by the end of this video, you'll understand how family dynamics explain why these three economic powerhouses would rather lose billions than lose face. These three countries are sitting on complementary economies that could absolutely dominate global trade if they just learn to play nice. China's got the manufacturing muscle that makes Amazon warehouses look quaint. Japan's designing robots are so sophisticated they probably have better social skills than most humans. Korea's perfecting consumer electronics that know your shopping habits better than your therapist knows your childhood trauma. Could you imagine what would happen if they form a trilateral free trade agreement? This would make the money printer go haywire. Instead, they've spent 23 years negotiating a deal that exists primarily in PowerPoint presentations and the fevered dreams of economists who still believe humans make rational decisions. 23 years. That's longer than most marriages, with significantly less progress toward mutual understanding and way more public arguments about who started what 70 years ago. But here's the thing, this isn't really about economics. It's about family dynamics on a geopolitical scale. Think about it, these countries share more cultural DNA than most blood relatives, but cultural similarity doesn't create harmony when you're competing for the same position in the global hierarchy. It creates the kind of judgment that only family members can deliver to each other with maximum emotional damage. China sees itself as the natural big brother who should be respected based on historical precedent. Japan sees itself as the sophisticated older sibling who modernized first. Korea sees itself as the innovative younger sibling who's tired of being disrespected. Does that sound familiar? Therefore, while Europe managed to turn centuries of mutual slaughter into a wine and cheese friendship club, East Asia decided that living next to each other means everyone gets to be petty rivals. The closer you are geographically, culturally, and economically, the more important it becomes to establish exactly why you're still better than your neighbors. Now we need to address the elephant in the room that's wearing a rising sun headband. Because Japan has what you might call a Germany problem, but in reverse. Germany spent decades teaching their children that their grandparents participated in horrors that should never be repeated. They built museums, mandated education, and turned national shame into national wisdom. It's like they read the manual on how to process historical trauma without becoming generational sociopaths. Japan, however, took the advanced placement course in historical amnesia. When the Americans realized they needed Japan as an ally against the Soviets, they basically opened the prison doors and handed out government jobs to war criminals. Imagine if the Nuremberg trials had ended with, well, actually, Hitler seems reformed now and we need someone who really hates communism. The same people who should have been facing war crimes tribunals instead formed the Liberal Democratic Party, which has been running Japan like a family business ever since. It's the political equivalent of letting your problematic uncle run the family reunion and wondering why everyone else keeps bringing up that incident from 1943. And no, this isn't ancient history. Japanese school kids still take field trips to shrines that honor war criminals as if they're national heroes. It isn't a settled issue when Japanese Twitter can churn out war crime denial posts that rack up likes faster than BTS concert tickets sell out. Therefore, when your Korean friend's grandmother refuses to buy Japanese products, she's not clinging to old grudges. She's reacting to a present-day reality where denial of her trauma gets repackaged as patriotic education and spoon-fed to the next generation with their morning rice. The shrine controversy is about which version of the past gets to be official, and when that shrine includes a museum claiming Japan was basically the Marvel Cinematic Universe of World War II, fighting Western imperialism to save Asia, well, that doesn't exactly scream, we've learned from our mistakes. This unresolved historical trauma becomes the foundation for every modern conflict that follows. Let's talk about what happens when that unresolved historical trauma meets modern economics, because the 2019 Japan-Korea trade dispute was basically a family fight that accidentally crashed the global tech sector.
I am compelled to draw your attention to the decision made by Japan just this morning to remove my country from its list of trading partners.
South Korea brings up the comfort woman issue again, arguing that the 2015 settlement didn't include actual victim input. Japan responds with a diplomatic equivalent of, "We already talked about this" energy. Then Korea's Supreme Court tells Japanese companies to pay compensation for forced labor. Japan hits back with, "Didn't we settle this in 1965? This escalates until Japan decides to restrict exports of materials essential for memory chip production.
Japan's export restrictions against South Korea could negatively affect the global economy.
Not just any materials, but the specific chemicals that Samsung and SK Hynix need to manufacture 2/3 of the world's memory chips. It's like cutting off someone's oxygen supply and then acting surprised when they start gasping for air. The global tech industry immediately went into panic mode. Intel and Qualcomm wrote joint letters that basically said, "Please stop having daddy issues, you're disrupting our supply chains." Even Trump, who generally treated international diplomacy like reality television, said he was concerned about this particular family drama. But here's what made this different from typical trade disputes. Korean consumers didn't just boycott Japanese products. They boycotted them with a kind of passion usually reserved for defending your bias in K-pop groups. People literally smashed their Japanese cars like they were breaking up with toxic exes. Airlines canceled flights to Japan because nobody wanted to vacation in a country they were mad at. You could get plane tickets from Seoul to Fukuoka for $8, which tells you everything about how seriously Koreans took their anger. Therefore, this wasn't really about semiconductors or economic policy. This was about respect, acknowledgement, and the exhausting emotional labor of trying to maintain a relationship with someone who keeps insisting your trauma is exaggerated for attention. The resolution? South Korea basically said, "Fine, we'll pay the compensation ourselves," just to get back to business. Japan welcomed this deal while Korean victims refused the money, seeing it as the ultimate humiliation. Peak Asian family dynamics. Everyone loses, but at least now we can pretend we're getting along. Now let's discuss why China and Korea can't just bond over their shared annoyance with Japan. Because apparently common enemies don't automatically create lasting friendships when family hierarchy is involved. In Chinese social media, South Korea gets called the kimchi country, which sounds adorable until you realize it's meant to suggest that Korea has no culture beyond fermented vegetables. It's like calling America the hamburger country, but with more historical condescension baked in. Japan and Korea both get dismissed as Western lapdogs who've lost their Asian authenticity by cozying up to America. The irony is devastating, considering China's own complicated relationship with Western ideology, but self-awareness has never been social media's strong suit. But China's dismissive attitude toward Korea goes back centuries before America was even a geographical concept. Chinese emperors viewed Korea as a vassal state with an inferior culture, and that condescension got inherited by modern Chinese nationalism like a family heirloom nobody wants but everyone keeps displaying prominently. The numbers tell the story. According to surveys, 81% of South Koreans have negative views of China, and nearly 90% of Japanese people feel the same way. These aren't political disagreements about trade policy. They're cultural judgments about things like hygiene, social manners, and whether Chinese tourists know how to behave in public spaces without cutting in line. Therefore, when BTS accepted an award honoring Korea-US relations in 2020 and mentioned their country's history of pain with America, Chinese fans felt personally betrayed. This also explains why China banned K-pop concerts in 2016 after Korea deployed a US missile defense system. If you choose America over China, then your entertainment exports feel like emotional betrayal. So here we are, watching three of the world's most sophisticated economies act like they're trapped in eternal family therapy, where everyone knows the problems, but nobody wants to be the first to apologize.